There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Mania. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads, and oh my goodness, I had a great reading week. Let's get that out of the way. And I really wanted to go outside, but you know what? It's too hot. And the last weekend, the cicadas, although one American subscriber said that she pronounces it cicadas, so I might stick with cicada, actually, along with my other pronunciation eccentricity, vlog. Why not? I think the earlier I get out there, the cooler it would be, and the... I was trying to Google this, but it seems to me that if I get out there like by 7, they don't start to wake up until maybe later. Last week I think I was out a bit later anyway. But I opted to instead read a bit more of the 2 books I started last week, so I would be freshen up my impressions of those. The only chatty news I have, and this is, I'm very excited about it. So far, I've told 2 people on Voxer, Britta and Joe, and now I'm going to tell the rest of you. Because I had gout for a few months, I had to stop using the exercise bike, and before that I had been quite religiously doing 20 minutes 3 times a day. It was so easy to fit into my schedule because I have a nice reading desk on it, and I read while I'm biking. So I don't push myself too hard. I never break a sweat. I don't turn the resistance very high. But it did cause me to shed a kilogram or 2 last year just by giving up breakfast and 60 minutes a day on the bike. I've pretty much given up walking outside because it's, except for a couple of weeks in the spring and a couple of weeks in the fall where it's not too hot or whatever. So stay on the bike at home and read while exercising. As of a few days ago, I had been back to 60 minutes a day religiously, and in fact I felt, and this is a really weird feeling for yours truly, I felt my body craving more, and I'm not talking about food or sex, I'm talking about more exercise. So I said to myself, let's add another 20-minute increment. Let's do 80 minutes a day. On the days when you're home most of the day or all of the day, because there's no reason why you can't fit in another one, maybe mid-morning, first thing in the morning, mid-morning, and then afternoon and evening. But if you're going to do that, then you also get to eat breakfast again for the first time. And I can't remember when I stopped eating breakfast, but I did 6 months, 10 months ago. I don't know when it was. Because nothing else that I had tried in terms of some kind of a diet or eating less or something, nothing worked, and I'm certainly not interested in you know, eating shit to lose weight. I like to eat well. I don't think I eat too much. I'm just have a middle-aged Caucasian male body that's just turning into a pear as I get older. So giving up breakfast was the easy solution, because I didn't really start eating breakfast until about 7 or 8 years ago, and then I got quite addicted to starting my day off with a big breakfast. So giving up the big breakfast and having my first meal at lunchtime, that helped. But if I'm going to do an extra 20 minutes, I get breakfast. It doesn't have to be a big breakfast, but I get a little bit of a breakfast, or I get something for breakfast. Yesterday I had a bunch of thumb-sized little sausages and eggs, 1 slice of toast and 2 eggs, which is a pretty small breakfast for yours truly, but it powered me up for the rest of the morning. And maybe that's enough about that, but I am really excited about exercising even more. And like I say, a lot of you out there who are actual gym bunnies or whatever, you're probably laughing at me, because I mean, I don't work up a sweat ever, unless my air conditioner isn't turned up high enough. But no, I use the bike at a comfortable enough speed that I can read. You know, I have tried biking twice as fast, thinking, you know, get your heart rate going and sweat a bit, but I can't read then. So no, that isn't going to work, because if I can't read, I won't use the bike. So that's my exercise regimen, and I'm sticking to it. On to the books. I have no bails. I have finished 2. I finished, finally, the book that my second pick, because I bailed on the first one, for the Vietnam thing for Invisible Cities. And that was The Committed by Viet Nguyen. And I didn't end up loving it, but I probably liked it more than the 3-star rating I gave it, but I was pretty cranky about the ending because I thought it was really too rambly. It is a worthy, sequels suck. Maybe Alexandria Quartet notwithstanding, that would be the one exception. Like, why does anybody write a sequel? But it is worth reading. It wasn't that the storyline didn't hold my interest, but it was kind of interrogating the gangster plot or a crime gang. That doesn't interest me at all. But what was really successful about it was that it's the same narrator as in The Sympathizer. I loved The Sympathizer. That was a 5-star read for me. And so now that guy, do we ever know his name? Yeah, I don't think we ever know his name, The Sympathizer, and he's called the Crazy Guy or something in this book. He and his blood brother Bon have come to Paris to escape their pasts, and they get hooked into selling hash on the street, and that doesn't go over well with the Arab gangs that are selling hash because they want to monopolize the market, and plot ensues. I could have cared less about the plot, actually, except that Nguyen did a masterful job of showing in a way that was at times quite amusing, but certainly intellectually stimulating, because I'm not into philosophy at all, not even political philosophy, and this was just a whirlwind of very smart writing about kind of self-interrogation and talking with these other gangsters and the people they were robbing and stuff about Marxist theory and so on. And I don't know how he pulled it off, because that would put me to sleep in less capable hands, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I also really appreciated when I want to stop using the verb interrogate because I think it's really pretentious, but I like the way that he took on his own culture, struggling with, trying to come to terms with the fact that Vietnam actually was an evil colonial country when it came to Laos, which I didn't know anything about that. So I appreciate it because it was told in a light way for the most part, but it also made me think. The overall gangster plot, yuck. The way that it continued the storyline from the first one, I thought was quite well done. The one thing where the social political stuff that he tried to insert that I thought was really patronizing, and maybe it's just me, but he tried to kind of bring in a bunch of feminist stuff at the end, which didn't suit his personality, if you remember from the first book, and just seemed added on to kind of cover all the bases. Like, I was expecting him to go to a gay pride march in the next chapter. Just a little bit too much. He overdid it. But it also could have been a third shorter and been maybe even more powerful, and I found the ending strung out in a way that just get me to just stop already. So that made me cranky, so I gave it 3 stars. I might, if I continue to keep thinking about it positively, I may up that to 4 stars later. But I do recommend it if you like Nguyen's writing, and especially The Sympathizer. I say be prepared that it's not as good, but why would you ever expect a sequel to be as good as the first one? That's just ridiculous. I hated his collection of short stories. Was it called The Refugees? So I was a little bit nervous to try this, and I was pleasantly surprised, but it ended on a note that made me grumpy, so I gave it 3 stars. I also finished Lolly Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner, and this was one of my secret reading projects because it was for Britta's birthday vlog, which went up last Saturday, and then I came out of the closet as reading it on Goodreads, and I finished it last night. Britta warned me, or she said, I don't know if you're, because I really as of last Saturday I was loving it, and she said, I don't think you're going to like the ending. And she was right, but only in that it brought it maybe down to a 4-star read. I didn't like being asked to believe in witchcraft and the devil, and I felt like there was enough of this that asked that of me that I started to get cranky, so I knocked a star off for that reason only. Most of it I could read as just her having kind of a mental episode and chose to interpret it that way, but there were a few pages near the end where it's like, you really want me to go along with this hokey supernatural crap? but just enough to bring it down to a 4-star read. There's a conversation at the end that Lolly, who isn't the most verbal of people, has with the devil about witchcraft that I thought was powerful, and if that hadn't been there near the end of the book, it probably would have been down to a 3.5 or 3-star read, but that kept me connected to what was going on. I love the writing. This book, it fascinated me more than I enjoyed it. What a wonderfully weird story this is, an enigmatic character, especially Lolly. For the most part, I didn't care about anything. Is she a witch? Did she move to a witch town? I think that let's just say that was all in her head, and it was an analogy for her feeling like she didn't fit into society and going her own way in kind of a delightfully grouchy way where she wasn't, like I say, the most verbal of characters, but every once in a while she would come out with these absolutely sarcastic or completely socially inappropriate outbursts, which I loved. So this has made me more interested than I had been to keep on reading Sylvia Townsend Warner. I read her Summer Will Show, which with mixed results, but this was much more positive, and whether I ever reread it, I'm not sure, but I know I would get a whole bunch more out of it if I did, because there's so much going on. There was something going on with her memory that I wasn't paying enough attention to that. There's something about her kind of forgetting and feeling like the devil was making her forget, or something. So I didn't know if there was something about dementia or Alzheimer's. Like I don't know. Just a lot happening in this very curious little novel. I recommend it to you. Most of my other secret reading projects that are not on my Goodreads and that I'm not going to talk to you about, and they're not the BookTube prize, I have to finish by the end of this weekend, and there's only one left after that probably I need to finish by the weekend after. So I have been doing a lot of that reading as well, but I do want to celebrate these two novels, which are both starting out to be contenders for books of the year, books that I've just fallen so deeply into. I'm feeling quite spoiled to have started two books that are this fantastic. And so I never do this, show two books together. This will be the screenshot. I will start with Damon Galgut's The Promise. This is a buddy read with Bob the Booker, but he's running a bit behind, so he hasn't actually checked in with me on chapter 1. I'm about 20 or 30 pages into chapter 2 now. I've checked in with him. So let me check in with you. I love this. I have one reservation, but everything else I'm just going to be spouting superlatives. So, as I think you probably know, if you've been paying attention on my channel or anyone else that's talking about it, this is an apartheid-era novel, although the first chapter is in 1986, the second chapter is 1995, so it's the dying days of apartheid and into the post-apartheid era. And it's about a white Afrikaner family, and each of the 4 chapters are about the death of one member of the family. So it's also about grief, and I'm thinking that the one reservation that I had about the first chapter maybe can be chalked up to the fact that the character that I didn't think was well developed, whereas all the other characters were more well developed, was the husband. So the first chapter is called Ma, and it's the mother's death, and she's not old, she's young, she's got teenage kids and whatnot, dies of, I think, a brain tumor. And no, I'm not going to say anything spoilery, but her husband, Maney, his character just didn't cohere for me. It just didn't come together, and so I was rereading some of those sections today to think about what I would say, and I'm thinking, well, he's also grieving, and it's a knotted, complicated grief because they had such a tempestuous relationship that maybe I'll be able to cut that some slack, because every other character, even the minor characters, just in a few deft strokes, just jumped off the page. Whether I loved them or hated them, they were just fabulously drawn. I need some more verbs to talk about character work. Can you give me some in the comments section? Though I'm getting sick of saying well-drawn characters, but it's such an important thing to me that the fact that the widower in the first chapter just came off as being a conglomeration of bad behavior, guilt, and grief, but I think maybe that's all he was in that moment of immediately after his wife's death and up into the funeral a day or so later. So I love some of the storytelling things that are going on here that I've never encountered. For example, the family that, with all this family conflict and, oh my God, racist, anti-Semitic stuff. The mother was Jewish and she'd gone, but she had kind of given that up to get married and then went back to it in the last months of her life. And there's a lot of resentment within her Afrikaner in-laws about that. Not among her children, but among the in-laws, and I'm not going to say any more about it. The narrative focuses at a certain point after we meet everybody upstairs, where one uncle who drinks too much goes up to somebody he doesn't know at this wake, like it's just everybody, neighbors and so on, in the house at like hours after the mother has died, and he just says to somebody he doesn't know, "So, are you having a good time?" And the stranger looks at him, I like that. And the narrator focuses on how many times things have happened, or the quantities of things in a one long paragraph that I had never read. I don't think I'd ever read anything, but I wrote in the margins, odd but strangely powerful. How many cars, how many times the telephone had rung, how many beverages had been served and consumed, and then actually focuses on what went into the toilet in the basement. And that sounds disgusting, but there are a couple things in there where you're going, why was that in the toilet? And Galgut does reveal later why one of the unusual things got into the toilet, but the other one that raised my eyebrows the most, I'm not going to say anything about what it was. It doesn't get explained, and it's just, I thought that was fabulous for just complicating and binding me to the drama of the wake and all these odd characters doing their best to act solemnly, even though they hated most of the other people in the room or weren't that fond of the woman who had died. Really well done. So was a little bit thrown that the main character in the first chapter, who dies in the second, that's not a spoiler because each of the main characters is going to die in this, or four of the main characters are going to die in this story, that he didn't jump off the page as much as the other characters. But the other characters, I loved the way the other characters were rendered on the page. The other thing, and I'm just going to, because I'm sure I'm going to do a full review, or maybe Bob and I will have a Zoom chat or something, so I don't want to go on and on about this book anymore here, except to say that there are two things in the first chapter that are typical deal breakers, like things I will bail over, or just things that I will hate, and it'll make me start to dislike the book. One is dreams in fiction. I hate reading about dreams in fiction, and the way that the dreams, it's the people sleeping that first night in the house after the mother's dead, and the way he wrote about the dreams, I was riveted. And the other thing was ghosts. So the mother is a ghost, and it was so well done. So I'm not saying that it's cured me of my allergy, but the way Galgut wrote it, I thought it added to the story, not detracted. So wow. Now, I was kicking myself a few seconds ago, a moment or two ago, I was kicking myself that I'd gotten this far in describing my initial reaction to this book without mentioning the central premise that involves the black South African character. And then I kind of thought about it for a few more moments and have decided to stop kicking myself, although I usually deserve a good kick. I think that actually this is what Damon Galgut wanted to instill in his readers, that he has presented a complicated, fascinating white Afrikaner family, and at the center of the family story is the black maid Salome, who, the dying mother, and this is not a spoiler, it's in all the synopses and whatnot on the inside flap, that the dying mother extracts a promise from her husband to give the house where the black maid is living with her son to her outright as her own property, and he promises to do that, and then the promise is broken. That's the central premise. But then we meet these larger than life characters, and we do meet Salome and her son in the first chapter, and they were also really, I thought, sensitively and deftly portrayed. I got a really strong sense of them. I got an even stronger sense of how fucking racist almost everybody in the Afrikaner family is in 1986, so that, you know, it was possible for me to talk enthusiastically for the most part. 95% of what I just have explained to you was very enthusiastic, very positive, without even mentioning that central premise that involves race and involves the black maid and her son. So that's fascinating. I'm going to have to keep thinking about that. So far, neither the Broken Promise nor the black maid Salome, or her son, have been mentioned in the second chapter, but I'm just a couple 20 pages into a maybe 80-page chapter. So, yeah, but there's something completely and really uncomfortably appropriate about that in terms of mirroring the society that Damon Galgut is portraying. And I have started Noopiming, The Cure for White Ladies by Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. And I love this so much. This is so strange, but in a way, like, I was worried. I heard Brian of Bookish and Mark Nash both say about what an unconventional narrative, and I thought, oh, I sometimes really struggle with experimental fiction where I can't really get my bearings. But this is different. There's something that's so visceral about this, and I don't know how to talk about it. I have to go and watch. Oh, no, I don't want to watch Brian or Mark's videos until I finished it, but I'd be so curious to hear how they described it, because I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of allegorical, yet the characters all seem human, but they also represent aspects of the self, of the mythological man who symbolically or realistically lies frozen under the ice as a way to get away from the world for centuries, and he's kind of dreaming these people up or something. I don't know, and I don't need to know, because I'm just so sucked into it, and it's humorous and challenging, the politics of it, the anti-racism of it. It's a portrait of the challenges that Indigenous people face is not done politely, but it's also not shrill. And I don't think any of those sentences convey the power of what I've read so far. So many of the pages are just like that, and I am consciously trying to spend almost as much time on pages that have one sentence as I would if it had a full page of text, to let that one or two sentences resonate before I move on. And I think that's what I'm being invited to do, and I'm actually doing it. And I also just feel that this book, the physical book, is there's a hum to it when I hold it and when I read it. There's something so incredibly powerful about this that, as usual, it has rendered me mute. But wow. And I almost forgot to talk about this because I'm a little bit uncomfortable to talk about it. This is the buddy read with Joe Smith of the Indonesian stories by Pramoedya Ananta Toer, Independence Day and Other Stories. Translated from the Indonesian by Willem Samuels. Now, Willem Samuels is actually a pseudonym for the same guy that translated this Indonesian novel that I read a few weeks ago, Not a Virgin, by Nuril Basri, translated by John H. McGlynn. But he's using a pseudonym. Like in the bio here, it says Willem Samuels is the pen name of John H. McGlynn. I don't want to disparage translators, but I'm not sure why. Well, anybody in this day and age, but why a translator would need a pseudonym. Am I missing something here? Anyway, I also don't want to diss him because I thought that the translation, I mean, the writing in this book was excellent. So I'm not going to reflexively blame the translator, but I have to say that as uncomfortable as it is to say about a story written about a non-white protagonist who also is severely disabled, I thought this was one of the worst, most disappointing, actually most infuriating short stories I've ever read. I absolutely hated it, and I don't think I'm going to say any more than that. Jo agreed with me. She didn't have the same vehemence that I did, but she also thought it was pretty bad. So I asked my Indonesian friend, Cecilia. I didn't ask her permission, so I won't going to quote her at length, but she just said it could be a bad translation. Yet I think the translator is, maybe he only does his shitty translations under his pseudonym. I don't mean to be flippant, because he's probably going to find this video, because I've gotten caught out that way before. But I mean, you sign your name to the publication, you send it out in the world, and you know, things happen. But I just thought there was something so blunt and banal about the fact that this protagonist had been severely injured in the War of Liberation in Indonesia, and he was left severely disabled and bitter. And I didn't care. Like, there was just no nuance. It's just like, oof. So Joe and I reacted. Our reaction was so negative that we actually thought we might bail at that point, because the first story is 50 pages. There's only about another 45 pages for 2 more stories, but we'll read 1 more. But if it's as awful, we're not going to continue. And I'm not going to rant. I've said very accurately how much I hated it. I certainly don't want to offend anybody, but it's my channel, and when I read shitty fiction, I get to say that it's shitty, and other people can disagree, but wow, what a disappointment. So yeah, that happened. I want to talk now, before I go on to what I'm going to start. So I finished 2, so I get to start 1, and you know what? I have decided, and I want to talk to you guys about this. The Booker long list drops on the 27th, early next week. That will actually maybe be Wednesday my time, or I'm not sure what time it drops on the 27th, but it might be my 28th. I may immediately start reading at least one of the books from the Booker long list as soon as it drops. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to definitively say that I'm not going to do all the reaction videos and stuff that the Booker chudokus, chudoku means addict in Japanese, the Booker chudokus out there, Eric et al. But I don't think so. I think I'm just going to read them, and I'm going to review them, and I'm going to talk about them. But what did Bob the Booker say? Actually, I don't know if he said it on a video. He said it in answer to somebody's comment, that it's posh bingo. All this Booker hype and Booker whispering and Booker predictions and stuff. He called it posh bingo. He said somebody famous called it posh bingo. Well, yeah. So I don't think I'm gonna get my shirt in a knot about any of that part of it, but I am really looking forward to reading the long list, and I'll get started maybe even before I check in with you on Friday, but certainly from then on it will be one of the primary focuses of my reading until the end of the year. And Women in Translation Month starts the week after next, and I am doing my best to keep connected to Invisible Cities, but I'm now to the point where if the one book that I've chosen doesn't work out for me, I'm not going to spend any time and energy to find a replacement. And, you know, if I have one sitting on the shelf or in my Kindle or something, fine, but that may kind of get pushed off to the side. I'm not sure. I have one of my Women in Translation Month, my TBR went up last night, one of those picks for Korea. It will also fulfill the Korea thingamajig. But one of the countries for July is Panama. So I ordered this, and I have it. The only thing that I found that looked interesting to me was the Book of Unknown Americans by Cristina Henriquez. Am I pronouncing that right? Henriquez? But yet it doesn't, I don't know, I kept looking at it today and yesterday, this week. Ideally, I should start that this week. I've got one slot. I finished 2 books, so I get to start one. It should be this one, but I'm just not feeling it. It's not like I've read page 112. I probably should do that. That's my thing, right? Why haven't I done that? Even the enthusiastic reviews of this, and there's quite a few of them on Goodreads, they don't pull me in, and I can't explain exactly why. So I'm going to rely on those of you who know this book and who know me, my reading tastes. Do you think it's a Sean book or not? I think I'm not going to read it anytime soon. So I'm going to do my best to read most of the Invisible Cities countries in the fullness of time, but I'm no longer going to try to fit them in the month that they show up, unless that fits in with me. So please help me decide whether this is something I should read now or later. So in terms of spontaneity, before I turned the camera on, I perused my shelves and thought, what's missing from my reading life right now? And that is women's fiction from decades gone by. So I'm going to try my very first novel by Miss Reed, fresh from the country. This is one of the Dean Street Press Furrowed Motorbow books, but I'm going to start it just because it's different from everything else I'm reading, and I'm going to be reading a lot of things that I have assigned myself to read. I also want to feel free to just pick up books just because, and this is my just because read that I will be starting in the coming days. I think that's all I have to say. Do you have anything to say about what I had to say, or anything at all to say? You know what to do. Thanks for watching.